It's our press preview coming up for you once more in a moment with all the morning papers. First, our top stories tonight. Hillary Clinton has confirmed that she will seek the Democratic nomination for the presidency in 2016, already heading on the campaign trail to Iowa. One of the 9 Britons detained on the Turkish-Syrian border is now being deported back to Britain, expected back in Manchester on Tuesday. And Ed Miliband's to launch the party's election manifesto tomorrow with a promise to reduce the deficit every year. So let's see what those papers have got to make of all that. Joining us tonight, Hussein, Nabila and Martin once more. Thanks for being with us. The front pages, first of all, those papers with The Guardian going with Labour's big promise, no extra borrowing. As it says, the party's manifesto will focus on budget responsibility. The Telegraph going with the announcement too, with Ed Miliband assuring voters the economy is safe with us. My pledge is on the front page of the Mirror, with Ed Miliband writing for the paper, saying his party will account for every penny. Same too on the Independent, with the Labour leader promising to put economic credibility at the heart of the party manifesto. He's on the front of the Sun too, but much smaller at the bottom of the page. It says that UK bosses back the Tories as Ed Miliband slated, they say, in a letter from 100 small traders. Front of the Times, passionate Cameron outlines his Tory dream as the Prime Minister switches election strategy, they say, amid polling fears. But on the right-hand side, a picture of Hillary Clinton, as on many of the other front pages, announcing that she's running for president. On to the FT, and shareholders in the biggest US companies could receive a record $1 trillion in cash this year, they say. Daily Mail claims that patients will have to take their passports with them when they attend hospital as part of a clampdown on health tourism. Making the front of the Daily Express a simple way to beat back pain, saying millions of sufferers could relieve their symptoms by following 4 easy steps. And on the front of the Star, Brit Bake Off starts now. No cakes to be seen, it's the weather. 25 degrees, they say, this week, with the start of a 3-month heat wave, possibly. So let's see what Nabila and Martin have made of that selection. I think it's plenty of politics. And the headline is on the front of the Mirror, My Pledge. It's the manifesto tomorrow, which has a sort of old-fashioned ring about it nowadays, isn't it, with social media and the internet and so on. But certainly in terms of the other papers, the Independent and The Guardian in particular, they're looking through it in some detail. Manchester, I think, is the launch tomorrow. So The Guardian first, Labour's big promise, no extra borrowing. Lots of text there. What does it actually mean for the voter?
It means, in essence, that Labour is saying it won't have any uncosted, unfunded spending pledges in its budget. So you've got this situation where they're saying that, for example, they won't commit to this extra £8 billion for the NHS because they don't want to have some unfunded commitment. And the Tories, of course, they're being accused by Labour of fiscal irresponsibility for having these policies. So in essence, what Labour is trying to do, rather like in 1997 when they came to power then under Tony Blair, trying to portray themselves, I should say, as an absolutely rock-solid, fiscally competent party that's not going to be reckless with the economy, and trying to neutralise this Tory attack on them.
Yeah. And of course, Blair did turn the Labour Party into a business party. And I suspect that Ed Miliband is trying to get rid of the Red Ed tag and show, I mean, the words that keep coming up in his manifesto are credibility and responsibility. So as we get closer to the election date, the emphasis is increasingly on economic issues. And in the end, because there seems to be quite a lot of consensus on a lot of issues, in the end, it's the management of the economy that's going to make the difference.
Yeah, which has always been the Tories' ace card. But I mean, it's interesting, if we just switch to the Sun, not perhaps everyone's listening because they're reflecting on this open letter from small firms, 100 small traders, they say, who say that basically he would be a disaster for business.
But this does have the slight ring, or the very loud ring, I should say, perhaps, of an anti-Labour Party paper, which is trying hard to find something to attack them with, because to find 100 small business people...
Sorry. Yeah, let's move that back, because I pressed it before we'd finished with that.
But also this idea that somehow the Labour Party is this kind of old-fashioned socialist parties, I think is wide off the mark. It's certainly not the case.
Right. Okay. Well, look, let's go back to more meat on it with the Independent, which is what we're trying to move in. There we are. Which again has got more detail on this. Miliband takes on rivals with a vow to protect the nation's finances, and they're talking about what they call is this sort of fiscal lock, i.e., that everything will be run over. There's a slide rule to say whether this works or not before it's actually introduced as a policy.
Yes, and again, there's this whole responsibility thing, and there's a quote there also in the story a bit further down saying that the very start of our manifesto is different to previous elections in that there won't be a great shopping list of spending pledges, and it's a really interesting message. I mean, actually, it might be a slightly difficult medicine for some Labour supporters to have to take, who maybe want some more spending pledges and everything else, but they're clearly recognising there is still an ongoing, there's still a very serious deficit. One of the criticisms of the current government is that it hasn't got the deficit down as it intended to do, and Labour obviously is trying to say we're going to be responsible, we're going to try to tackle the deficit, albeit slightly slower than the
balance
Tories.
The books,
yes,
right,
and yet make sure that I mean, the pounds in people's pocket is becoming increasingly...
Harold Wilson. Well remembered, yes, the pound in your pocket. Well, meanwhile, the Times is going on the other side of the divide with passionate Cameron outlining his Tory dream. PM switches election strategy amid polling fears, they say, to jumpstart his party's campaign with more upbeat message and tax giveaways. And of course, this is on the back, I guess, about the inheritance tax announcements over the weekend.
Yes, which was essentially aimed at his core electorate, his core constituents, people in the southeast and outside London, essentially in the shires, who do own large, expensive houses and to which the inheritance tax was aimed at. He's obviously trying to widen his constituents as he's desperately searching for a majority.
Yeah, I mean, this story doesn't actually spell out the particular detail of how he's going to do it, but here he says that these people aren't oligarchs who've millions stashed away. They're decent, hard-working people who just want to save their children's future, and of course that is aimed precisely at this attack that has been, quite justifiably in a sense, over the last few days, that quite a few of the Tory policies, whether it be the inheritance tax cut or the attack on Labour over the non-doms tax, seem to be aimed, the Tories seem to be supportive of a fairly small number of people. So he's trying here to change the tone of that to say we're aiming
the army of people who get up in the cold and dark for long commutes and 10-hour shifts because of that deep instinct to provide.
Yeah, but
is there a danger she's going to actually perhaps annoy a rather lot of people? Say, well, OK, well, if you're serious, start doing something about rail fares or working hours and zero-hour contracts, etc., etc.
Well, of course, he has sort of come up with this pledge about rail fare freezes, hasn't he? Out of the blue, again, one of the ones that Labour is saying is not funded in any shape or form, and back to the same point, really, that Labour keeps saying, actually, the Tories are coming up with these things that they're not.
But I think at least with the inheritance tax announcement, David Cameron introduced clear left-right divide, and he had to be commanded for that because,
With Nigel Farage saying that, perhaps the Tories should have got even further in this last 5 years, with UKIP promising, no inheritance tax threshold.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is that there isn't enough clear divisions in this campaign, and when something like the inheritance tax comes up, then...
You spotted, meanwhile, in the inside page of the Mail, this is Quentin Letts, who, of course, is the sketch writer, parliamentary sketch writer. He had the dogged look of a jogger mid-marathon. Sees the Tory leaders serve up feel-good fare. To a dazzlingly sunny, gale-swept Cheltenham to hear David Cameron promise to lift the ghoulish tax death duties. Arriving at a church hall to speak to a crowd of 120, the Tory leader first had to get past the BBC's Carol Walker. So it's a bit of a flavour, I guess, of the hustings. Yes,
and I mean, Quentin's columns are always very entertaining, aren't they? And he's got this, they've also got this picture with Cameron with some sort of cockatoo type hairstyle there being blown about in the wind. But he's also on a serious level. He's saying, is it not time for him to discard his jacket and tie and immerse himself in crowds of unvetted swing voters, and pointing out that 45 years ago, an assured PM unexpectedly lost to an oddball opposition leader and we're still suffering the damage, is what he says. And it goes back to that argument that a lot of this election campaign has been scripted. Cameron's been almost protected and looked a bit defensive, and and the campaign has been too negative. And again,
so is a suggestion that all the stage management, and Linton Crosby, of course, is their election strategist, that it's actually not allowing the politicians as such to come forward and be who they would be naturally, that it's all too guarded, it's all too produced, if you like.
So, yes.
Yeah. I mean, perhaps to a certain extent it could be disastrous if politicians started to behave naturally. I think...
Yeah, OK.
But I mean, Cameron is theoretically an asset to the Tory party. Most polls show that he polls ahead of the...
His personal ratings.
His personal ratings
yeah.
perform ahead of his actual party's ratings, and yet that's not shining through at all in this election campaign so far.
Right, OK, let's move way inside the sun now. If we've got this, page 25, there it is. You take the high road, I'll take the low road, thanks. Builders in cliff face peril. A crew with hard hats but no safety harnesses. Where is this? Oh, in China. Right, OK. Yeah. Cliff face peril. It does look rather rickety, doesn't it?
They're quite extraordinary photos, aren't they? I mean, you have to be glad we have health and safety legislation in this country, actually, because if you look at this, I mean, those photos of them...
So they're actually building a road on the side of a mountain. That's extraordinary. Let's just move these pictures in slightly bigger. This is walking the plank, literally.
Yeah.
So it's just sticking out the side of the mountain there on the edge, and this guy's walking round. We've then got this this other one showing, if we just move that there, the rickety scaffolding holding them as they're sort of moving that further along the cliffside. And then at least he's got a hard hat here, we'll see this one, but no safety harness. And an indication that, of course, the number of accidents in various industries across China is huge. With actually, they don't even record the numbers of those killed and injured.
Yeah, probably not strictly, I'm assuming.
No,
But I think these kind of pictures can have the potential to become iconic pictures, just like the pictures of the Empire State Building, of those workers, hanging on, working on the side, having the lunch break
on the arm of the crane. But I mean, this is it almost looks comical, except that it isn't, because it's it's real
Let's
people.
Hope the road snaking around the sheer cliff face will attract tourists to Pyongyang in China's Hunan province once it's finished. Well, I don't know. I think I'm second thoughts about travelling on a road built like that, but there we are. Right, coming up, a second shot at success and back to the White House, maybe or maybe not. Yes, Hillary Clinton launches her campaign for the presidency. Welcome back to our press preview. More from the papers, more from Nabila and from Martin, as we take a look at, well, not just the Telegraph, but also the Times, also... Get it up here, The Guardian, slightly different picture of her, and she's even at the top of the FT. Yes, it is Hillary Clinton making an announcement earlier for the 2016 presidential campaign. This is how she did it in the United States.
I'm running for president. Americans have fought their way back from tough economic times, but the deck is still stacked in favor of those at the top. Everyday Americans need a champion, and I want to be that champion. So you can do more than just get by. You can get ahead and stay ahead, because when families are strong, America is strong. So I'm hitting the road to earn your vote, because it's your time, and I hope you'll join me on this journey.
It's like a toothpaste ad, isn't it? All those happy, smiling people. But, I mean, that's the irony. There aren't many happy, smiley people in America. There's still got a lot of economic problems. And, of course, she has got to try and find a way of promising a better future without indicating that the Obama presidency have failed in any way.
Yes, indeed. And I found... more crucially, that there was a lot of arrogance and indeed cynicism in her announcement, not least because she failed, remember, at the nomination last time around against Obama. And this idea that Americans should now settle for second best and allow her to have another go is frankly, to me, a bit ridiculous. And it's not terribly good for democracy, this idea that, you can have a go at any point, and especially when her husband had a go before her. There's a bit of, I don't particularly like this dynastic approach to politics, to be honest.
Yeah, but she's been nominated by the party, and she will have to be voted in at the caucuses. I mean, it's not as if it's a shoo-in in any way.
Well, it looks like it's a
shoe
shoe-in for the nomination. It's going to be a lot tougher when it comes to the actual race.
Yeah, but it's not just the Democratic Party, because we've got Jeb Bush, part of that family dynasty, standing, we expect, as a Republican candidate.
Well, of course, it is ironic, as you were saying in the earlier programme, that the land of great opportunity and meritocracy and so on is potentially going to produce another Clinton-Bush contest and so on. But on the other hand, I think she's a very significant figure. I don't personally think that it's wrong that she's able to stand again, and if she's got to stand, if she gets the nomination from the Democratic Party, then the American people can decide whether they want her or not. And
is there a valid question, though, that the fact she is now 67, so she'll be 68, 69 if she gets into the White House, and the last president of that sort of age was Ronald Reagan. And, of course, he was pilloried for being doddery and old and out of touch and forgetting his lines.
Well, he was over here, but I'm actually over in America, of course. He was seen as a great success, and maybe history would regard him as a quite successful president, I think. So, and I certainly don't think there's any reason why somebody of that age shouldn't necessarily be president, or indeed, actually, especially with people getting younger and younger in terms of their...
I personally believe that the Clintons should give it a rest, frankly, and there should be some room made for somebody who's new and indeed fresh and perhaps more idealistic to have a crack at presidency.
Anyone in mind?
The problem is there's nobody else.
Exactly. That's the thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, the cupboard's bare. And the other question, of course, as we see Bill and Hillary there in 1997, is, what do they do with Bill? I mean, as certainly we were hearing a little earlier from Iowa, Des Moines, where she'll be heading, and, he is still a political asset, but still deeply divisive as well.
Yeah, he might become more of a liability than an asset. And especially if you combine, the scandals that they were both involved in, not least of all the Clinton Foundation.
Which the Republicans
will use again and again, or the latest scandals about Hillary Clinton's emails, for example.
Well, one of the interesting aspects you picked up, I think this was in the Sundays as well today, page 2 of the Times, looking at what it might mean. America reconsiders special relationship with Britain. And, of course, it has been the aspect of the Obama administration. They've looked more towards the Pacific rather than across the Atlantic.
Yes, and certainly this story is referring, tangentially to that, also about our defence spending, in effect, and our economic policy, and suggesting that there may not be such great interest in Britain from the American point of view, because we may not be playing such a big role.
Pulling our weight in NATO.
Yes, exactly. And also as an economy as well, it's suggesting there's a line there, isn't there, saying that if the dynamism of the British economy, which is an important reason for them to be connected and to be paying a lot of attention to us, somehow is jeopardised, which that it implies that might happen. That
and a possible exit from the European Union.
Extraordinary pictures on page 11 of The Sun at Southampton General Hospital. There's poor girl Jasmine Keatley. Now, she only had, I say only, tonsillitis, but she had breathing difficulties. In fact, she had also, I think, started to dehydrate as a result, so was put on a drip, but on these chairs in a waiting area.
Yeah, it just obviously plays into some of the concern there's been over recent months about some of the conditions at times in the NHS and the difficulty of coping with all the patients who are in there at the moment or arriving at A&E and so on. And it's a...
The Trust saying yesterday it was not aware with any issues with Jasmine's care. Spoke to her, she was assessed appropriately and did not require a hospital bed immediately.
Yeah.
Well, some people may differ in their assessment looking at that, but there we are. OK, thank you for your selection. We'll see you again soon. It's the weather details for you next.